Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us again. The third part of our agility series. My name is Rob Sarine. I'd like to thank the National Crop Insurance Services for sponsoring this series, and thanks to Scott for organizing. And I'd like to thank two of our presenters today, and I'll introduce them shortly after a brief presentation, Dave Covey and Kevin Gould. And also thank Dr. Trey Malone and Erin Lazat and Florencia, I think you pronounce her name, Colea, who won't be here probably because she just had a baby about a week ago. So congrats to Florencia. So I'm going to start off here. I think this is the right one. If I screwed it up again. Am I good? Do I get a thumbs up, everyone? All right, cool. So just like we have every time, MSU is open to everyone, all of our programs. There we go. Looking at the wrong screen. So I'm going to talk about agility on the farm, identifying obstacles and opportunities to farm diversification, modification, and some of the different factors that play into that. Just a brief recap of where we're at. The first agility session, Trey basically gave an overview of farm profitability factors, kind of a retrospective, looking at current and future view of farm profitability in the U.S. The second session, oh, sorry, I forgot to give you that. Second session, Florencia gave an overview on farm profitability, diversification, alternative production systems. And today I'm going to be talking about agility on the farm. I'll look at the current state of affairs, U.S. and state trends, some exogenous challenges or risks, and some opportunities, and that's why I brought the presenters in today. And then on June 23rd, we'll have a panel discussion on creating resources to support farm success. So probably seen this before, or at least have this in the back of your minds, what's been happening over the last, 160 years, 70 years. The land and farms drastically increased in the 1850s up until early 1900s, and then dropped off quite a bit up until the 70s. And pardon my dog barking in the background. The UPS guy's probably here. So land and farms dropped off, and then it slowly has just dropped off as farms have consolidated. And you can see though that land in farms has, number of farms dropped off, but land in farms has dropped off well. So there is some consolidation happening, but overall acres have dropped as well. So this is from 2019, kind of right in the middle of the issue with dairies, and there was a meeting. Secretary of Agriculture Perdue said, in America, the big get bigger and the small go out. I don't think in America, for any small business, we have a guaranteed income or a guaranteed probability of survival. So while vertical integration and consolidation has led to some efficiencies, it has also caused major changes to rural economies. And there's a lot of different reasons why this is happening, and we don't really have time to get into that right now. But if you do have questions on this, talk to Trey. He's the economist. This chart shows milk costs and returns per hundredweight, 1980 to 2018, and the blue line is the net returns. And the red line that I just put across the middle is breaking even. So from 1988 all the way through, except for 1 year here, the net returns were below zero for dairy. And this just shows by scale. So everything below this line, small dairy herds, 50 to 99, 100 to 199, 200 to 500, and really the only ones that had net income above zero were, during certain years, were these larger operations. Just a snapshot in time in 2016. Again, the herd size at the bottom there, net returns. The only ones making money in 2016 were they had over 2,000. Same thing is happening in livestock and in different crop sectors as well, and I'll just focus on this one on the left here. So this shows hogs and pigs, total farms in blue in 1987 through 2017. 250,000 farms, close to that in 1987. Now we're probably down just over 50,000. Quite a drop off in the number of farms, and the sales midpoint here is half of all animals are on farms with at least as many animals as the midpoint, and half are on farms that are no larger. So this is kind of the middle point here. And so for hogs, it's the number of animals sold or removed from a farm over a year. And for egg layers and cows, it's the midpoint flock or herd of inventories. Same things happening in other animal industries as well. So the authors of this article contend that consolidation is happening across all sectors at the national and global level, and this is resulting in a particular set of power relationships that have numerous negative impacts on farmers, workers, communities, as well as consumers who have experienced higher prices and less innovation. It can reduce farmer autonomy and redistributes costs and benefits across the food chain and can squeeze farmer incomes. And I would also add environmental externalities as well. This is June 3rd, 2021, just came out less than a week ago. NOAA forecasts the average size dead zone for the Gulf of Mexico this year. So an average size, and the USGS estimates this is smaller than average river discharge, 90,000 metric tons of nitrate and 15,000 metric tons of phosphorus into the Gulf of Mexico in May alone. This is from agriculture and urban runoff. So this zone basically is a hypoxic zone where these nutrients come in, they create algal blooms, and then this dies and sinks. It depletes oxygen levels, so no fish can live in that area. This has been happening every year since they've been measuring 1985. So another consequence of what's happening here is farmer incomes, or their share of the food dollar. So we go to the store, pay $1, how much of that goes back to the farmer? Well, it really varies based upon what you're purchasing, but you can see this little bit of a downward trend here. It just went up slightly in 2019 to around 14 cents out of every food dollar. But if you look at where it's been over the 1950s, it was up by 40, 43 cents. So this drastic downturn in the amount of income that a farmer is receiving for every dollar that you spend. And that varies depending upon whether you're eating out at a restaurant or grocery store as well. And Trey talked a little bit about this, but I think it's worth repeating that these smaller scale farms, and this is based upon income, rely quite considerably on off-farm income. In 2018, farmers whose primary occupation was farming and had sales under $350,000 had a median net income of negative $1,524. 2004, this paper came out. In fact, I saw Fred Kirschman give a talk on this at the Northern Michigan Small Farm Conference, and it's been in my mind for a long time. And they contend that over the last several decades, the American food system has increasingly followed two structural paths. One is the small-scale farm and food enterprises have thrived by direct marketing to consumers with benefits to the communities. And the second is that giant consolidated firms have established supply chains that move bulk commodities around the globe largely to serve their own business interests. And farms in between there, in between this vertically integrated and the direct markets, are those ones that are mid-sized farms, and they're really the most vulnerable since they're too small to compete in the highly consolidated commodity market, and too large and commoditized to sell in the direct market. So this is 2004, and a review of the ag census in 2017 by the National Sustainable Ag Coalition showed that it's still happening. Consolidation is driving medium-sized family farms out of business. And if they don't invest in beginning farmers and the advancement of farm families in checking this increasing consolidation, we're going to be at risk of losing the ag of the middle entirely. And this trend continues. Again, it varies by location, but this shows percent change in the number of U.S. farms by sales class over the last 30 years. A little bit of an increase in those smaller farms. Again, that disappearing mid-scale commodity farm, and then increases in large farms. So farms are getting larger. Another issue to contend with, and this probably isn't surprising just based upon the previous slides, is conversion of ag land to urban and low density residential development, which is happening. This is from the American Farmland Trust. So development converted 31 million acres of ag land in the U.S. between 92 and 2012, which is double the amount previously documented by national data sets. So this one hit home to me. I was looking for a picture of cherries to put in this talk, and I came upon this article from 2019. And this was a farmer that I grew up working for on Old Mission Peninsula here in Grand Traverse County. Basically, the cost of production is more than they're receiving. It's 60 to 65% less than it was 5 years ago. That's the price. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. The turkey dumping cherries on the market below cost of production. And so what's had to happen is farmers are selling. They want to pass it on to their kids, but this is just a local indication of kind of that broader national data set. Here's another way of looking at it. From 1986 to 2018, number of cherry farms has dropped off dramatically, or the percent change. You can see overall 68% down, a little bit of an increase in larger scale farms. So there is some consolidation happening, but for the most part, we're not seeing those small or mid-scale cherry farms anymore. And I'll get into this just a little bit before I'll hand it over to our panelists. But you also have these exogenous challenges, climate change. Since the 70s, climatologists has been documenting this. These weather-related changes are making it more riskier for ag producers. It's intensifying competition for land with available water. Rising temperatures can reduce crop yield, and then droughts, floods, fires, heat waves, etc. This was just a couple of weeks ago. This came out, worst water crisis in generations on the Oregon-California border in 127 years. Consequence of Hurricane Florence, overflowing CAFO manure lagoons into the waterway, into the ocean. And this just happened also, a really interesting cyber attack hitting the world's largest meat supplier. They have over 150 plants in 15 countries. They produce or process 25% of the country's beef and 20% of its pork. The 5 biggest plants in the U.S. Have had shutdowns, halting 20% of the meat production, and supermarkets and users like McDonald's are going to be the most immediately impacted, and potentially shortages of meat and raise for prices for consumers. Another thing that just happened, this global supply chain is efficient, but when things break down, bad things can happen. There were 400 ships stuck just waiting to get into the Suez Canal right there. And then you have a major impact like COVID, which no one really expected. And in these consolidated systems, you have farmers, workers, and the environment that are interconnected, so that when a problem hits one part, it can quickly engulf another. And so this is a major financial hit for farmers who euthanized 300 to 800,000 hogs, 2 million chickens, and then you have the health impacts as well. So getting to hopefully a little bit more positive news. This is a fairly famous book out there, Competitive Advantage of Nations, Michael Porter. It says there are 2 ways to be competitive in a global economy: by being the lowest cost supplier of an undifferentiated commodity, or by providing the market with unique and superior value in terms of product quality, special features, or after-sales service. So in terms of COVID, one thing, this is a book review, or the New York Review of Books, May 12, 2020, Michael Pollan. It says the advantage of local food systems has never been more obvious. The rapid growth during the past 2 decades has at least partly insulated many communities from the shocks. He talks about small, diversified farmers being resilient, community-supported agriculture, more people cooking at home. The COVID itself is making a case for deindustrializing the food system in terms of sacrificing some degree of efficiency for greater resilience. So as rural agriculture areas have changed over the last decade, the definition of ag has changed as well. It kind of raises these questions and conflicts on how to balance placemaking, if you will, with ag in terms of rural and regional development. you asked the question, what is agriculture? This is a 80-acre indoor growing operation down on the bottom left there. So these ag areas were perhaps thought of as places where crop or livestock production occurred, and that, you know, processing and marketing happened elsewhere. I think now farms, now more than ever, have to raise it, have to be more than raise it and sell it to someone else, especially those farms in the middle. Many other agricultural activities are happening on the farm as well. I think this might be Covey Farm. You know, people are hosting weddings. This is a cidery. This is a Michigan Farm Co-op, which is a group of 12 local farms up here in Northwest Michigan that are delivering or combining to develop a CSA together. Another way to add value, you know, different certifications. This is USDA organic, and, you know, in contrast with some of these negative returns, you know, at least in this way, the costs are higher, but they are getting greater returns. Now, does that mean everyone should go out and convert to organic? No, not necessarily, but there are options to, besides trying to compete with large-scale commodity producers. Here's another one, agritourism farm. They have, you know, a working orchard, but they also have a farm market with local produce, and they host weddings, and they have a petting zoo, and, you know, not everyone's going to convert to something like this, but there are different options out there. Direct marketing, you know, farm markets, you pick wholesale. Marketing the experience, so agritourism destination, destination business, events, activities, social media, you pick tree farms. This is an interesting case right here. This is Loftus Ranches. They're a large hop farm. They put in a farm brewery that is just producing outstanding beer and really taking off. So I think, you know, when we think about rural and regional economic development, we need to think about planning, and that it's not done in a vacuum. It's done in coordination with planning for downtowns and to strengthen these rural regions as a whole. We need to consider the new economy and smart growth. Strong agricultural lands, working lands, and green space are critical. And I think, you know, as COVID made clear, a lot of people are interested in these authentic experiences, especially if they can happen outside as well. So just kind of to wrap up here, this is also from that same 2004 white paper. What is the vision for our agri-food system 10, 20, 50 years from now? If we are only asking our farmers to produce bulk commodities to be manufactured into food, fiber, energy, and other products as cheaply as possible, without regard for the social and ecological costs associated with such production, we might indeed want to stay the present course and reduce farm populations to the lowest possible number. But we have traditionally expected more from our farmers. We expect them to take care of the land for future generations. We expect them to care for their animals properly, expect them to protect the environment, to be good citizens of their communities, and want them to provide us with food products that have unique attributes. And we rely on them to provide us with food security. All of these public aspects contribute to a healthy landscape, healthy communities, pleasurable eating, and to a sustainable future. So what do we want our regions to look like in the future? There's different options out there. I'm hoping we can develop a shared vision and invest in local food systems, take a regional placemaking approach where elected officials are actively working to help farmers innovate and add value, can help maintain profitability for growers and increase the resiliency of entire regions. So that's just a preview there. So I'd like to introduce now, I'm going to stop sharing, Dave Covey and Kevin Gould. And if I can get out of this, I will find your bios. There we go. Nope, that's not it. Here we go. All right. So Kevin is an MSUE beef educator. He has 29 years of experience in his current position, focusing on beef genetics, nutrition, grazing systems, animal health, and direct marketing. He and his family own and operate a commercial Angus Cimarron, you correct me if I'm wrong there, Kevin, cow-calf operation, have been direct marketing freezer beef for the past 24 years. Kevin has also served as the vice president of the Michigan Cattlemen Association and other industry leadership roles. And Dave Covey of Covey Scenic Farm. Covey Scenic Farm is a 146-year-old family farm near Petoskey, Michigan, that was an original homestead under President Grant in 1874. Over the next 5 generations, the farm transitioned from dairy and livestock through 1960, with potato production in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, to cereal grain in the 70s until the end of the century. And over the past dozen or so years, the farm transitioned once again to grow fruit, vegetables, flowers, seasonal trimmings, with a focus on high quality products that are direct marketed to the public. They currently have 25 acres in diverse certified organic vegetable production, 3 greenhouses, and 9 high tunnels. And they also use the latest technology in high tunnels irrigation, early season growing techniques, and the latest energy conservation ideas through their geothermal walk-in coolers and heated greenhouse and solar PV array. Um, they sell through their on-farm retail market, CSA program, into a variety of restaurants, schools, and other retail outlets. So thanks to you both for taking the time here. I'd like, if possible, just to have you guys introduce yourselves and maybe explain a little bit about your operations. And then I'll ask some questions, and everyone else can feel free to jump in too.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'm Dave Covey. I'll start out. So great to be here today. And like you're kind of looking at a lot of these slides, my challenge growing up, I grew up when the farm was in that cereal grain operation. We're growing cereal grains and selling seed grain to all the other farms in our local area. But my parents said, David, whatever you do, just go to college, get off the farm, because there's no money in farming, and it's a lot of hard work. And it was the no money in farming thing that really was the thing that stuck with me. So I worked off the farm for a while, and then it's been 20 years ago when I finally said, no, there's got to be a way to have this farm stay in production, because most of my fellow farmers around here in the Petoskey area, realistically, most of them are out of business and it's just open fields, or definitely in that chart of very low, if any, profitability in the conventional crops up here. We're so far from our markets for commodity crops. My vision of coming back, the only way I could picture a viable economic model was one that had us growing things that were high quality, focused on selling direct to the public. And this is 20 years ago, before you're kind of in the mode now where we kind of expect to see a lot more direct marketing. Back then, I wasn't quite sure if it was going to take off. I had spent some time on the East Coast and out West, and I saw those models there seeming to have good traction. I said, maybe this is it. Let's bring it back to Northern Michigan and see if it'll work. And started slow with growing, whether it be seasonal flowers, and then produce, vegetables mostly. We do some apples and strawberries right now, but mostly vegetables that we would sell directly to the public. And we went through the steps of getting certified organic, mostly because that's the way we choose to eat, I guess you want to say, mostly. But also the community here in our region really appreciates that and is looking for that at farms. So that it also aligned with our customer base the more we learned, and folks were willing to pay for it and come out and search for it. So right now we're growing, it's actually pushing closer to 35 acres certified organic. And most of it is being sold either on farm or, like you mentioned, through restaurants, schools, senior centers. We have a CSA program on farm, and really just every avenue we can to get produce into the local community. I do wholesale some, and we sell some into institutions. But even for us, when we get into it's hard for us to compete from Northern Michigan and sell into the commodity, vegetable, markets. Our prices are just too high, and we can't be competitive. And then I can't get it downstate cost effectively either, let alone with the labor challenges of getting enough labor. So right now, that's still the core of our farm. We're trying to get more people to come to the farm and quite honestly get not just their ability to buy produce, but also their ability to have create memories. Because like you alluded to, the diversifying of farm, especially when we're so far from large markets and when our seasons are so short, has really become the cornerstone of how we can make a profit and a living. We want to be above that profit line and not in that do something different and still end up at in the negative, and it's easy to do that in farming, to change but not have a profitable venture. So I'm really focused on making this a sustainable, not just your farm for generation to generation, but a sustainable one that will be sustainable because it's profitable. My kids will want to take it over if they can make money at it. They won't want to take it over if they're going to do it just for the passion of doing it. And so that's where we're focused, all the time. But I have diversified in almost lots of different areas to be able to get enough profit dollars to make us profitable. I often tell all the intern students I have here, there's one thing to make a profit, but there's another thing to make a living, and you have to have enough profit dollars to really make enough money to make a living. And that's our goal, is not just to be profitable, but to make enough profit dollars to be sustainable. And I think that's a key part. I can share some more, but maybe we'll start there and then pass this over to Kevin, and we can bounce back.
Thanks, Dave. Kevin has a unique perspective because he's also an extension educator as well. So, what do you think, Kevin?
Great start, Dave. Thanks for the intro there. So from my perspective, I guess I would echo a lot of the things that David said, and going a little different direction from the livestock side that is really my expertise. I grew up in a fairly intensive livestock grazing operation in northern Michigan, and in the Clare area, stocker cattle primarily. So marketing was critical, acquiring and marketing those animals in volume semi-load lots. And that's a commodity system. If you're good at it and you keep your prices down and you're efficient in your production models, there's some profitability opportunities there, but it's very land intensive in those larger operations to graze many acres to get the unit size that's needed to do exactly what Dave said, to be sustainable economically as a family, to make enough income to do that. And we were fortunate we had off-farm income growing up as well, so we were able to expand the operation and grow it and not have to rely all of that farm to pay for all that extra acquisition of land and resources. So as I went to college in Michigan State and got an education beyond the farm, which adds to the education on the farm, I believe, I really still believe the beef industry was where I wanted to be, and that's the extension area that I chose to work in a multi-county area. And I've worked with producers for about 29 years now in my current position, really helping them go through some of these same challenges of how we get started, how we better our production systems, how we are more profitable, more productive, and more sustainable in our models. And it all kind of falls back to farms needing to, first of all, set some goals, not just by the single person that thinks he or she is making decisions, but by the whole family, if the family's involved, to sit down and go through that process and really talk about what the family wants to do. Because agriculture is a long-term investment, not only of financial investment, but of your time. And so by doing some of that goal setting and discussing about those models, it's easier, I think, to really sit down then and develop a business plan. And I would say that needs to be a working business plan, because your plan is probably going to be modified and changed, as Dave's has, looking at diversification of commodities in his operation to generate more income. So that's one avenue you can go down, or you can get better at the commodity that you're producing, and really do that better, and maybe expand that or grow that enterprise to get more dollars back to the family or to the business. So I don't think diversification is a requirement. It may be an option if you have those resources and tools to do that. And I think in the vegetable and fruit thing, it makes a lot of sense to do some of those things in more of a diverse climate. In the livestock side, it may not. It may be better for you to be fewer commodities in your production system and do a better job with production in your system and focus mostly on marketing. So what I do is I look at any commodity that we're working with, and there's a commodity price, just like there is corn right now, which is at a pretty high price, but typically corn $3 or $4 would catch it most years. And most producers, that's below cost of production. So you've got to be large, just like the dairy model that was laid out earlier. You've got to be one of the large farms to really to make a small amount of income per acre or per unit. So if you're going to be small in these smaller farms, smaller acres, smaller units of sale, you need to be better at what you do. And cost probably isn't the place you can do that, because your economies of scale just do not work for you in that model. You can't compete with the big boys. But you can compete on the marketing side, and that's exactly what I think Dave is doing in that Petoskey area. What a great part of the state to have a population up there that is seeking out his resources, ag resources, and that's so. Whenever we're going to build a model, we first and foremost have to start with the market that we have established or are going to establish for our product. Secondly, try to meet the customer's demands as close as you can. You're not going to meet all their demands, and Dave went through the process to be organically certified. That's probably going to benefit him long term in that environment. We haven't done that on the beef side because it's a little more intensive from a livestock standpoint to do that. And I don't think the benefit is so much there on the protein source standpoint because the customer is a little different buying protein today. My customer is more concerned about if I know what I'm doing and can I explain to them what and why I have a production system that I have. What tools that I'm using, what resources that I'm using, what technology that I'm using, and why I'm using it, and is that safe as a food source for a final product for me and my family or their families as purchasers of that product. If they can trust me as a producer of a high quality, safe product, wholesome product, then they're more apt to buy that product. And I think that trust key is really an important factor here. So the key point that I like to make is commodity prices. The farmer's share of the commodity prices, as Rob mentioned, is pretty low. It may be 12 cents, 14 cents over time of all commodities. Beef in particular, it ranges from about 38 cents to about 55 cents. Low point in the market to high point in the market. So the farmer typically averages probably in the low 40 cents per every dollar spent at retail. So about 40 or 42% of the retail value the farmer receives. Now I would argue the farmer does 80% of the work and gets 40% of the income. Okay? So that tells me as a producer, really of any commodity model, is how can I get closer from retail, from commodity wholesale value or commodity value to retail value? And what are the steps in that chain that will help get me there? Okay? And I'm in the protein side for beef in particular, I am not going to be a processor. I have no desire to process beef. I know how to do it. I can learn that trade pretty easily, but I have no desire to do that. So that piece of the chain I'm willing to pay somebody else to do, and that's about 20%, 15 to 20% of the actual final retail value, is that processing, packaging of the product. You take that 20% off, that means there's 80% still available at retail value that I can capture. And if the commodity price only allows me to get 40%, I can essentially double my net value of my commodity just by focusing on marketing direct to the consumer. Okay? So I think with your commodity that you have, you've got to figure out where you stand on wholesale value. In cherries, I wish I could buy cherries for 20 cents a pound at retail. They're more like $2.99 a pound. Okay? So that case in point is the farmer's getting 10% or less of the retail value. So we have to find ways to get as much of our product marketed as close to retail value direct to our consumer as possible, realizing in most cases, especially in Michigan, since we are a green and white state, right, Rob? We're Spartans. We're half winter and half summer. So we have about a 180-day growing season, give or take. That time of the year, and you may be able to extend that with houses and so forth, but that time of the year we can have our commodity fresh in a lot of cases. The rest of the year, we've got to store it, freeze it, or bring it in from somewhere else. So we give up some of that flexibility of having the same commodity in front of our customers fresh every day of the year at the grocery store if it's coming from our CSA or it's coming from our hoop house or it's coming from the local farm. So those are all challenges we can work through, but the customer, I think, quickly adapts to that they realize for quality, local produces that higher quality product, and you may not have the luxury of having that high quality product available every day if it's a green growing product. Now, in the beef side, we can produce beef about 10 months of the year in my operation for our customers. There's a few months we won't have it available just based on when the calf crop is born. But the systems you put in place are important to try to capture more of that retail value. You don't have to be greedy, but you need to be profitable, as Dave mentioned earlier. So there were also some quotes. I really like the Michael Porter quote that you shared earlier, Rob. I think resilience The comment about resilience is that the challenge is that you got to get large. You got to be small to be resilient. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think there's resilience across all sizes of farms. There's also challenges across all sizes of farms. And the meatpacking industry we saw back in April of 2020 with COVID, it wasn't the fault of the meat industry COVID hit, okay? And it wasn't the fault of the farmer. What that did is broke the chain of the labor force. So once the labor force could not functionally process the product anymore, it backed the product up on the farm because we had nowhere to get that product processed. So what happened in the marketplace? Two things happened. The farmer's price plummeted because there was no place to market the commodity. The retail price skyrocketed because the product wasn't coming through the supply chain, okay? So the farmer lost, the retailer gained, and it further exacerbated our problem of not having control throughout the whole chain. And that same problem applied to a small processors that I worked with, just like it did to Tyson or JBS on the other end. So in those situations, it may not matter what size you are, but you better have an alternative of where your animals can go in a profitable market or opportunity. And if you don't control it from conception to consumption, then you're at risk of having a problem somewhere in the supply chain. And most of us do not control it from conception to consumption, whatever commodity we're producing. So I hope that helps give a little overview, and we can move on from there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin. I think, something you guys both touched on is it's fairly obvious that you guys have your numbers dialed in pretty well. The other thing, that you touched on too, Kevin, is what you're good at and what you want to do, and it's not processed beef. And maybe that's a numbers thing too, but how did both of you decide, what to give up, because you can't do everything in order to, get where you are today?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, for me, that's probably a really key point. It's what you don't do. I can't tell you how many things I look at on our farm. We were 300 acres, and I'm farming 35 of them with in produce. So there's so many things I look at and say, oh, we can go do this or that, and they're all many of them viable business models. But the key thing here is some models are more viable than others, and there's only so much time in the day. And everything I look at, everything we kind of delve into, it always takes more time, it always takes more energy, and it always it has a certain scope that's a little bit larger than the knowledge that we have at the beginning. And we have to be able to go in with our eyes kind of wide open that all of these ventures are big ventures and take a fair amount of effort. And I am also at the size myself now as an operation that I can't do it all. So now I have to be hiring the right person and being able to hire the right person. It's not just saying this is the person I want to hire and I'm gonna go hire them, especially in this environment. Finding the right person and being able to have them come and join the operation here in Northern Michigan, where we're only really growing, you could say a handful of months a year, and being able to have them employed and be able to live on their own with the work really only being a portion of the year at full scale is the challenge for operations like us, especially when you're starting out with new ventures. So it's always profit dollars that drive whether it makes sense, as well as whether we have the bandwidth to take that task on with limited staffing or ability to truly bring in limited staffing. And I have to say, on the staffing front, we end up we're housing over half of our workforce now on the farm. And whether for us, we have local folks here, we have H-2A migrant workers come in to work on the farm in the fields. I bring in intern students from around the country. But I'll be honest, even just yesterday, one of our local great gal who works on the farm said, David, I just lost my lease. I'm going to have to go do something else and move out of state. And so the only thing I can offer is, well, let me see if I can house you. If I can house you, does that solve the problem to allow you to stay and work on the farm and work in our area? So housing for us here, at least in Northern Michigan, is a huge part of that. And as an agricultural person, I've got land and I have some housing. Being able to supply housing, I think, is going to become key to to my ability to grow the operation. Quite honestly, it's a fit that I'm having to work into my model of how we work, and but it all comes down to profit dollars. And to share openly, neither my wife nor I work off the farm. We're all in on this. This is how we make our living, and so we're really trying to do this kind of by the numbers, and we need to do it by the numbers. So, and we got 3 kids in college right now too. So, but that's where we're at. But I don't know if that helps.
Yeah,
Share a
that
little bit
helps.
in that.
Yeah, and I hear you. I've got one heading off next year, so already trying to figure that out. And you bring up a really good point. That's a huge issue here in Northern Michigan, and Trey talked about this, a couple of weeks ago. Is that it's different. The commodities we grow are different, and things are different in different locations. But the cost of housing in Northwest Michigan is ridiculous. So having to add that into your plan, just one more thing.
It's not just the cost. It's not just the cost. It's the ability of people to find it. Some of these folks
Availability.
can't
Yeah.
even. It's really to that point now here that there people just can't stay because they lost their lease and they have nowhere to go. There's no place, nothing even available, let alone
Yeah.
at a price.
My wife works at the
It's a tough spot.
hospital, and they have traveling nurses, and the 2 that she's talked to recently both live in motorhomes here in Traverse because they can't find housing,
Yeah.
or maybe they choose to and they get a housing allowance. I don't know.
So
You want to?
yeah, well, I just had like a quick question. You both clearly have kind of carved out a bit of a niche for like what you guys are doing. Diversification can be a part of that niche, like by trying to pick this is the type of person we're going to try to sell to in our CSA. So these are the types of things that person would like to purchase. Or, when it comes to like regional beef systems, actually just yesterday, the Biden administration released this massive supply chain document that's outlining like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of grant money to go into regional beef systems, et cetera. But I wonder if you guys could talk about how to identify, like how somebody should identify their niche to go into. So like we've done a bunch of hop stuff, and like the growers are really focused on consistency. They're trying to do these things right. And so they go in and talk to the brewer that they're trying to sell to. And the brewer, honestly, like, yeah, the brewer cares about quality of hops, but also the brewer cares about like the annoying neighbor next door or the, like all of these other things that go into their business system. And so I'm just curious, like when you're going after a customer, whether it be an institutional buyer or just an individual consumer, how you identify that person and then work from there, or maybe you start the other way.
I'll start just a bit here on the protein side. So in my Angus Simmental, Rob, you're close. Just a crossbred system, and I see this. A great question, Trey. I see this question all the time in my extension job. Is, there's 40 plus breeds of beef cattle in this country, okay, and that's way more than we need. There's really about 6 to 10 that are probably viable breeds of beef in this country that actually contribute a significant amount to the supply chain, and they can vary based on region of the country. But the key is with any product, and Dave hit this about quality. You've got to produce a consistent quality product for your customer. If you fall off the wagon on quality, you don't have a repeat customer anymore. And all of my marketing is based on a repeat customer model. If they don't come back and buy beef a second time, I've failed. Okay. The only reason I want customers to stop buying beef from me is the doctor refuses to let them eat beef or they've died. They need to be a consumer of beef. If they are a consumer of beef, rather, then I want them to have the opportunity to buy beef from me, and I'm going to do everything I can to meet their needs. Their needs will change. They may buy a whole beef from me for 10 years, and they decide that it's a quarter or half that's what's going to work for them as the kids leave home or they lose some of that market or don't consume as much. We're going to accommodate that in any way that we can. But the key is, in the protein side, is you've got to well define what your consumer needs. As many of the consumers under one umbrella, if you're going to be in a single commodity, as possible. Don't chase the fringe, okay? Now I have a lot of people that I work with getting started that are trying to chase the fringe, something that's a novelty that really hasn't got a developed demand chain to it. And I think that's a big mistake because these commodities in the protein side, especially beef, from conception to consumption, we're 36 to 38 months. That's a long time to be waiting around before you make your first sale. Okay, so we got to make sure. I think and I'm a hunter as well, so I talk about targets. You know, when we're sighting in the rifle, we want to be as close to the bullseye as we can. Same thing with your model, developing your production system to reach that target of that customer that you're shooting at or trying to hit. You may not hit it perfect, but you can adjust to that. Okay, to adjust that sighting a little bit to get closer and closer to what the target or lion's share of your consumer demand really is. I think that's critical. I have so many people that start out and I tell them they're way off the paper. I mean, you're shooting at the target, you're not even hitting the paper. Okay, let's focus on hitting the paper first and then fine tune it to hit the center of the target, the bullseye. And they'll find that bullseye for them. It's different for them than it is for me. I think the diversification of our product is a good thing. Not everybody should be raising a commodity like I am. There's other demand out there that other people can chase, and that diversification is a healthy thing for us to increase demand overall for our product. Because not everybody's going to eat or want to demand the product that I'm producing. So there's two avenues there. Diversification is good, but you have to be able to focus in on what the target for your geographic area, your population is. It's different in Petoskey, Michigan than it is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Okay, different population of consumers in those different areas of the state. So I think a lot of it comes down to really educating your consumer, especially in the protein side, Trey, because so many of them don't have a clue of what we're doing out here on the farm or of what we're producing and what it all really means. They have a conception of what they think is reality, but they haven't been to the farm. And Dave mentioned the fact about getting his customers to the farm. I couldn't agree more. The more people you can get to your front door to see what you're doing, the longer you're going to have those customers. And the more that they're going to share their experience with others as a good experience to help with your marketing. And I think that is critical. I do very little marketing. I don't pay for any marketing, zero. And we basically are word of mouth, and the place I like to be in is I have not quite enough supply for the demand that I have. We're very, very close to being balanced. I don't have to work real hard at it. It'd be better if I had to work harder at marketing and chose to do that. And I may, after I retire from extension, to expand production or sourcing of livestock that meet my specs to increase my marketing opportunities. Doesn't mean I have to produce them all. Okay? That's a real good point here. You don't have to produce every commodity you're marketing, but you better well know the supply chain that you're marketing from so you can have trust in that supply chain and convey that to your customer just like it's your own. And a lot of the people that I work with have diversified in other protein sources, but they're not producing those. They're letting somebody else do that specializes in that area, and they're bringing that product in to improve their overall sales and increase their bottom line or their profitability, as Dave mentioned. So the beef system is certainly going to be different than what Dave's doing in the fruits and vegetables side, but there are a lot of similarities relative to meeting customer demand.
And I might add in a little bit here. The key thing I think, and Kevin hit it really well, is quality is like a given these days. If someone's going to come to the farm and buy from the farmer, they're expecting quality. They're demanding quality by being a repeat customer, and they won't be a repeat customer if they're not getting quality. So that's almost like a given. You can never short on quality. And then the other key part, and this sort of ties in, I think, what Kevin's saying as well, it's a relationship. It's what we're really doing by getting people to come to the farm is we're building that relationship with that person. They want to know where their food is produced. I think more so now than 20 years ago. They want to know how it's being grown, how it's being raised, and feeling comfortable with it. But also just they like that relationship. I can't tell you how many people come in to literally to brag about they're buying their produce here versus someplace else. because they know that relationship, and we can't as farmers underestimate that value for marketing and draw to get people to come and buy your product. And it's what the farmers market's all about, but it's also farms as well. And that it just builds that trust, and it builds that quality, and it's something that we rely on to grow our market. So in the produce side is one, in terms of how we're a little bit focused on the vegetable side, obviously, and we're diversified some from there. But even in the vegetable side of things, like here's an example. We have a CSA, which is that box of produce. It's one that's been done around the country by a lot of people. But we also then created this version of the CSA, which is more like my wife and I eat, which is what we call open market. And it's a model that says, hey, come into the farm or on farm market here, yeah, any day of the week you want, as often as you want, and literally take as much produce as your immediate household will consume, all for one fee. And it's like unlimited produce for one fee. And we did a bunch of research on this as we launched it, because it really supports and really encourages people to eat like we as farmers eat, where we come in and say, we're going to have cauliflower and broccoli tonight, and we need some onions, we need this, and I just take as much as we need, and then we're cooking dinner, and on we go. Now people are also able to do that, and I charge them on the number of people in their household. And what we're really trying to do here is to get all of their produce dollars, because once they've bought in, they have no inclination to say, hey, I need some tomatoes, I'm going to run down to Meyer and get them. They're saying, no, I already bought into this membership. I need to run out to Covio's and get my produce, even though I just was at the grocery store, because I already paid for it, if you will. And it gets repeat customers coming out all the time. And we found over the years that the people really do take as much as they consume, because I've always been a strong believer that people don't want to throw away food in their fridge. No one likes throwing away bad food. It's not just I paid for it, so I can throw it away. It doesn't make you feel good to throw it away. And that's the general consensus I'm seeing people. So here we've got this model now. It's almost more like the gym membership, where you sign up and you say, hey, I should go to the gym all the time. And some people do and use it every day, or twice a day or something. And others say, yeah, I go every now and then. And others say, yeah, it was a great idea, but I didn't really go as much as I should have. Shame on me. But the reality is we kind of average all of those costs out, and we end up ahead as a farm. And I can encourage people as a farmer to say, hey, you're getting certified organic produce, unlimited, eat as much as you can, encouraging them to change their eating habits. So we as a farm are encouraging people in the community to eat healthier. People embrace that and say, yeah, I want to do this, and are doing it. And we're getting all of their produce dollars. Again, a different marketing technique on us being able to move produce, larger volumes of produce, and something that's just really well accepted in the community now. And so we're just trying to grow that program out. So it's sort of like, it's not like creating a new venue of products. We're just trying to grow it as a new marketing product of the same thing. So there's that avenue as well, as you kind of look at ways to market the one commodity you're growing, or the thing that you're narrowly focusing on.
Let me ask like the cliche economist follow-up answer. So when we're talking about these like commodities, we have very thick markets. So the price that you set is the market price for the most part. We're talking about moving into these spaces that are more specialized and specialty, in a place where you're really trading in part on the relationship between yourself and the customer. So how do you develop the pricing strategy for trying to set like something that's a unique product, or unique setup like that? But even the basics, right? Like, you don't want your customers to leave thinking that you're hosing them. Right. But like, it's like, how do you go through it? Do you like set your cost of production and then kind of work up from there, or what's the thought process to pricing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one we struggled with here. I'll be honest. For years, we were saying organic sweet corn, gosh, that's like impossible to grow. You can't do it. And sweet corn sells for cents per ear in the grocery store. It's mass produced. No one's going to pay you. It's the one you're going to lose the most money on if you're going to grow. So, yeah, quite honestly, I said, no, let's see. I just love sweet corn, and obviously we're an organic grower. So I said, we're going to grow it. We're going to figure out a way to grow it reasonably cost effectively. I can't keep all the worms out because it's organic, and I'm not good enough at it to do that yet. So I'm going to sell sweet corn that has potentially worms in it. Some, it's not that many, but every now and then there's one with a worm. And I'm going to sell it for $1 an ear because that's what I need to make money at it. And we've been doing it for years. And guess what? I can't keep up at $1 an ear. Again, it comes back to the quality. And we tell people right up front, big sign, hey, this is Covio grown. Don't, what our little cliche thing is, you may find a worm in this ear of corn. And people basically say, I don't care. I want it because it's quality. They know it's grown organically. They know it's not sprayed. It's not BT, or it's not, genetically modified. And for so much of the population, they say, yeah, I'll pay for it. And when they eat it, because we just harvested it, it's got a really good eating quality because it's just fresh sweet corn is really good. And they just haven't had that experience before. So that brings them back because the quality of that experience is there. And they say, yeah, I spend $3 on a cup of coffee every day. I can spend, $5 on a handful of ears. And people aren't buying dozens of it. So it's now we're selling it by the ear. So they're taking 3 or 4, but I'm getting my $4 for, 4 ears versus $4 a dozen. And so that's how I kind of set those prices. And the same thing, cherry tomatoes. I've been selling cherry tomatoes, $3 or $3.50 a half pint at, farmers market for the last 10 years. And people said, you can't do that. And once they taste it and say, wow, this is really good. It's like pricing at that $3 point. You can sell anything at $3. It doesn't matter. There's no reason to sell something at $1, even if it costs you. It's kind of that marketing part of it that after spending so many years at farmers markets, you're going to realize that everything's around $3 for a reason, because you can sell it through so much easier if you can package it in that quantity and then people just take it. So there's a little bit of that going on, and it's price and cost are not related. And I think it's price is tied to perceived value and not so much cost of production. As long as we're above the cost of production, that's how I'm viewing it more. And that's what we need to do to be able to make a profit, because there's a lot of other stuff that we spend money on that no one pays for. My irrigation pump upgrade that or failure, or my tractor rebuild. So that's all built into it. And there's a lot of those things that get factored in. It's not just the amount of.
Trey, it's a great question. It is, and each commodity, and Dave hit some real good points there about perceived value. So for the protein side, it's really simple. We've got some tools on the MSU beef and pork and on those websites on how we've done this, and some spreadsheets to really calculate a profit margin into that scenario. So what we do basically is start with the retail price for our commodity. That's available. Usually it's a month delay on the pricing structure from retail beef representing the whole carcass, and I think it's about $6.30 a pound, give or take, right now at retail. So it's fairly high. So what we've done is looked at a spreadsheet to work backwards, allowing you to put in some production costs into that, and include all the processing costs into that spreadsheet, and really build in a profitability or a profit margin per head into that. And that makes it really nice for a family business like mine, where you can say, okay, if I want to make $700 a head and I want to make $40,000 a year, I got to sell 60 head of cattle, or give or take, So that model works pretty easy there, and that spreadsheet works pretty easy there. It gives you an opportunity to plug in cost, your cost for production, your cost for processing, and wherever that's being done, any other additional marketing costs you have for communication and so forth, and then build that profitability per head. And the nice thing about that is, in my structure, we're coming in at about 85% of the value of or cost of retail. So when you take a customer through that process and say, you tell them, here's retail price for USDA low choice beef on average for the whole animal at $6.30 a pound. My example, it's like $5.20 a pound right now based on my pricing structure. You're saving 15% to retail. It hangs for 14 days, dry aged, so you're going to get a higher quality product. I guarantee my product full replacement. It's going to be a frozen product, but you're getting a volume discount by buying compared to buying retail hand to mouth. And you get to shop in your freezer where it's convenient versus going into the grocery store and having that be a weekly event to try to acquire protein for your family. And that convenience factor has some value as well. So those are all examples of what we take our customers through. New customers, you really want to spend some time with them in the protein side because they're making a large single purchase, same as a CSA, a big investment it's going to be something that pays for a season or potentially for the full year for them as a food source. You want them to fully understand the quality, the value. Something else that I do is I take them through a cut sheet. If they're buying a quarter or a half, I say, here's the cut sheet, here's what's available to you, here's your options, and now what does your family consume? What cuts do you use? What cuts don't you use? What cuts could you potentially use but just need some cutting instructions or some recipe instruction on? What I want my customer to do is when they get done, the last 3 packages of beef in their freezer is a package of burger, a package of steak, and a roast. I don't want them to have 10 packages of roasts when they're all done that they're not using. That tells me I've done a good job. When they reorder, they know they're on the target now for what their demand is for their family. So those are important things as well. That I think it's a little bit more that customer service, and we are still a value-based food supply chain, and I think there's some value in having people perceive they're not getting hosed, as you said. They're getting some value. But they're still going to have to pay a fair amount for that value. And like Dave said, we can set the price wherever those price points are, as long as they think there's a high quality product and they're not getting a product priced way above retail. The convenience factors play in, and the quality of the product sells itself. I always ask for my customers to give me feedback, especially new customers. Send me an email. I give them a phone call. How's the beef? And 99% of the time, they can't believe this quality existed because they have never gotten it beyond retail before, and it's so much different. So that customer is probably a repeat customer because of quality and everything else.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dave. We do have another question, but I don't want to keep you guys, so if you have to leave, that's fine. Dave, do you have time for one more? I think it was specifically to you. It's from Florencia. Florencia, congratulations too on the baby. She said you might have touched on this, but could you say if you've analyzed how far consumers are willing to go to use the open market surface? And I think she's talking about how far they're willing to drive or to come to the farm. Have you analyzed that?
Yeah, great question. I wish there was a full mileage. So for those of you who know the Michigan geography up here, so I'm in Petoskey. I have people in Gaylord, so that's just a half mile south of me. I've got people in Charlevoix, which is literally a half hour west. I've had as far away as Sheboygan, which is an hour, I'd say almost, you're pushing an hour. But they were coming over, working, I think, in the area, or would come over to shop once a week anyway. So they would come and buy. So I kind of think the range is there. That and obviously Harbor Springs, we got people from Harbor Springs coming through Petoskey's traffic in the summertime, which is a big challenge. We touch that range, but obviously distance is the challenge. I'm a little bit fortunate because I sit right on US 131, so it's a lot of people will drive by. And a lot of people will do their shopping in Petoskey or come to Petoskey on a reasonably often basis for other purposes, and that might tie into their decision too. So I don't know if that helps.
That's exactly it, yeah.
But the one thing I do notice is CSAs, having to pick up a CSA on a specific time or a day is a big challenge for people, and it's one of the reasons this model is a lot more flexible. They can come whenever they want to. And that helps significantly versus the standard CSA.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, I wanted to thank you both for your insight and your willingness to share with our audience. I really appreciate it.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I guess the 23rd is our next session. You will be getting an email about that shortly. So looking forward to seeing everyone then. Thanks again, guys. And thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.